Welcome to Iraqi Dinar News, where you receive real and authentic updates about the Iraqi dinar. If you want to stay informed with moment-by-moment developments, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Today we are analyzing a statement that has generated significant discussion within the Iraqi dinar community. The claim suggests that Iraq has sealed its borders, creating what is described as a closed financial system, with no foreign currency entering or leaving the country, and that this is supposedly the final step before exchange activity begins. There is also mention of a short timeline, possibly within days, for exchanges to start. As always, our responsibility here is to separate speculation from verifiable economic realities, and to evaluate what such a scenario would actually mean within the framework of Iraq's financial system, monetary policy, and international obligations. First, let's address the concept of sealing borders. From a sovereign perspective, countries absolutely have the authority to tighten border controls for security, customs enforcement, or currency monitoring purposes. Iraq has historically implemented enhanced border controls during periods of instability, particularly to prevent currency smuggling, capital flight, and illicit financial flows. The key institution responsible for monetary policy in Iraq is the Central Bank of Iraq, and it works in coordination with customs authorities and financial intelligence units to regulate cross-border currency movement. However, the idea that Iraq has completely stopped all foreign currency inflows and outflows, including US dollars, would represent an extraordinary monetary measure. Iraq's economy remains heavily interconnected with global trade. The country's primary source of revenue is oil exports, and those oil sales are conducted internationally. Payments are typically processed through global banking systems and ultimately involve dollar-denominated transactions. The country's oil sector is largely coordinated through entities such as Iraq National Oil Company, and oil revenues are settled through international financial channels. If Iraq were to fully halt foreign currency movement, it would disrupt trade settlements, banking transactions, remittance flows, and import payments. Iraq imports a substantial portion of its consumer goods, food products, machinery, and technology. These imports require foreign currency settlement. Therefore, a complete shutdown of currency movement would not simply be a technical adjustment, it would represent a major macroeconomic intervention. More realistically, what often happens in emerging markets, including Iraq, is not a total border seal, but rather enhanced monitoring and tighter controls on dollar auctions and currency transfers. The Central Bank of Iraq has previously restructured its foreign currency auction system to limit misuse, reduce dollar leakage into neighboring markets, and comply with international anti-money laundering standards. In recent years, Iraq has worked closely with international financial institutions to modernize its payment systems and improve transparency. When we hear the phrase closed system, it is important to interpret it within the broader context of capital controls. Some countries temporarily impose stricter capital controls to stabilize exchange rates, reduce speculation, or protect foreign reserves. That does not automatically indicate an imminent currency revaluation or a sudden exchange event. It typically signals an effort to reinforce monetary discipline and restore balance in foreign exchange markets. Now let's analyze the claim that this was the last thing that had to happen before exchanges begin. From an institutional standpoint, currency exchange mechanisms do not depend solely on border status. Exchange rates are determined by a combination of monetary policy, foreign reserves, inflation control, fiscal discipline, and market confidence. The Iraqi dinar's exchange rate policy is managed by the Central Bank of Iraq, which operates within the broader financial environment influenced by the Ministry of Finance and the country's budget framework. For a significant change in exchange rate policy to occur, several structural elements must align. These include stable foreign currency reserves, controlled inflation, strong banking compliance standards, and integration with international payment systems. Iraq has indeed been working toward greater integration into the global financial system, including aligning banking regulations with international standards and enhancing digital payment infrastructure. But it is critical to clarify something for dinar followers. There is no verified public evidence from the Central Bank of Iraq or from internationally recognized financial institutions confirming a sudden, closed system event tied to a near-term exchange window of Tuesday or Wednesday. Exchange rate changes, when they occur, are typically announced through official monetary channels and are reflected in international forex markets. If Iraq were preparing a shift in exchange rate policy, especially one significant enough to affect the global perception of the IQD, it would involve coordination with correspondent banks, international clearing systems, and potentially institutions such as the International Monetary Fund. These processes are not triggered solely by border control measures. In the short term, if Iraq were to implement tighter currency controls at the borders, we could interpret that as an attempt to stabilize the domestic dinar market. One recurring issue Iraq has faced is the spread between the official exchange rate and the parallel market rate. When the parallel market rate diverges significantly, it creates arbitrage opportunities and can pressure foreign reserves. By tightening border controls and monitoring currency movement, authorities could reduce speculative demand for US dollars and strengthen the official rate's credibility. For local Iraqi citizens, stronger enforcement could mean reduced access to physical US dollars in the short run, but potentially greater stability in the dinar over time. For IQD followers outside Iraq, however, this type of policy action does not automatically translate into an immediate revaluation or exchange opportunity. Long term, the broader economic implications depend on whether Iraq continues structural reforms. The country has been focusing on digitalization of payments, strengthening its banking compliance systems, and reducing reliance on cash transactions. These reforms are aimed at improving transparency and integrating Iraq more deeply into the international financial system. A more transparent and regulated financial environment can build investor confidence and reduce risk premiums associated with the Iraqi dinar. Another factor to consider is Iraq's fiscal position. Oil revenue remains the backbone of the national budget. As long as oil prices remain supportive and production levels remain steady, Iraq can maintain healthy foreign reserves. These reserves are critical for defending the exchange rate and maintaining monetary stability. If border measures are being used to protect those reserves, that would be a defensive stabilization strategy rather than a signal of imminent exchange events. We also have to evaluate the psychological dimension. Statements suggesting that this is the final step before we go often create emotional reactions within the dinar community. But financial systems operate on structured policy decisions, not on countdown-style triggers. Monetary authorities prioritize gradual stability over sudden shifts because abrupt moves can destabilize domestic markets, create inflationary shocks, and erode public trust. For IQD holders, the responsible interpretation is this: stronger border controls, if confirmed, could reflect efforts to clamp down on currency smuggling and unauthorized dollar outflows. That can support exchange rate stability, but it does not guarantee a revaluation, nor does it establish a fixed date for exchange activity. Investors should always look for official confirmations from recognized financial institutions before drawing conclusions. It is also worth noting that Iraq's banking sector continues to modernize. Electronic transfer systems, compliance monitoring, and digital identification systems are gradually replacing older, cash-heavy practices. These reforms are long-term structural upgrades. They strengthen Iraq's financial credibility internationally, which could over time contribute to greater currency stability. From a macroeconomic perspective, sustainable currency appreciation would require diversification beyond oil, growth in non-oil GDP, private sector expansion, and consistent fiscal discipline. Border control alone cannot accomplish those outcomes. It can assist in controlling leakage and speculative pressure, but broader reforms determine the currency's trajectory. In the short run, market participants should watch official communications from the Central Bank of Iraq. Any real change in exchange policy would be reflected in published exchange rates and banking instructions. In the long run, the more meaningful indicators will be foreign reserve levels, inflation trends, trade balances, and structural reform progress. The idea of a completely closed financial system is not typically sustainable for an economy that relies on global trade. Therefore, if there are temporary restrictions, they are likely targeted and strategic rather than absolute and indefinite. Policymakers aim to maintain economic continuity while tightening compliance. As always, we encourage viewers to approach circulating claims with careful analysis. Financial stability is built on transparency, official policy communication, and measurable economic indicators, not on unofficial timelines. Responsible investors evaluate fundamentals, verify sources, and avoid emotional decision-making. In summary, if Iraq has strengthened its border controls to limit currency movement, that could support domestic monetary stability and reduce speculative pressure on the dinar. In the short term, this may narrow gaps between official and parallel exchange rates. In the long term, meaningful appreciation or structural change would depend on sustained economic reform, fiscal strength, reserve management, and continued modernization of the banking sector. We will continue monitoring developments closely and provide updates grounded in verifiable information and sound economic analysis. If you value responsible and factual Iraqi dinar coverage, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video so you never miss an update. Remember, this content is provided for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. Always conduct your own research and consult with a qualified financial professional before making any investment decisions.